not, because then the audio kind of gets disconnected.
Okay, like this?
Yeah, like just move your screen a little down, like a little,
The screen, okay.
yeah,
Um,
bring it a little down so that your face doesn't
yeah.
get cut. A little
How
more.
about a
There's a
little bit
little,
more?
a lot of space on top,
Hang
so
on, hang on, hang on, hang on. Like this. How about that? Hello?
yeah, I think this is better. Yeah, this
Okay,
is better.
okay.
Am I audible enough?
Yeah, yeah, do it now. Don't waste time. Yeah. Okay.
Your audio is not clear, sir.
Oh,
So I think there's some issue with your network.
really?
Yeah, it's not clear
Um, what if I use this mobile phone to talk to my mobile phone again? Let me just see. Uh,
because the video is also pausing in between.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um, so the audio is not very good, is it?
the audio and the video both. So I think there is some internet connectivity issues at your end.
Really?
So
So how about this now?
yeah, this is better. This is way better.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
this is perfect.
all right. Okay.
All right, sir. So we'll start.
Yeah.
Okay, so sir, you are aware that at least 20 Indian Army personnel were killed in a face-off between Indian and Chinese troops at the line of actual control in Ladakh's Galwan Valley yesterday. This is the first clash involving fatalities on both sides since 1975. Why do you think we are seeing this kind of an escalation from China in 45 years?
Well, first of all, you're quite right to point out that this is the first major incident involving fatalities. In fact, it is quite remarkable that in spite of all these border disputes, which have lasted for 35 years, not a single live shot has been fired on both sides. That means both countries wanted and bent backwards to address these issues over the past 35 years. Have been very, very careful and in establishing mechanisms for dialogue, both on the ground amongst military commanders and also higher up in the government hierarchy, all the way up to the Prime Minister Modi and perhaps President Xi. And it seems that while there have been talks on the ground amongst between military commanders, the kind of discussion hasn't reached up to the very top. Now there are two issues here. First of all, the area called Galwan, which is where these fatal incidents happened. According to the Indian reports, it is within the line of control on India's side, but there seems to be some dispute on the China side. So this is a fundamental question. If this question is not settled, there's bound to be further incursions. Now, this kind of understanding or mutual even disagreement cannot be reached by military conflicts. Otherwise, any military conflicts, because between two nuclear powers, would be
Right,
unthinkable.
right,
So I think that first of all, you need to resolve this basic issue about whether this area called Gawan is within the line of control on either side. And there's no use resolving this through military gunfire because this is
right,
unlikely to be resolved. The second issue is that what has led to this incursion or conflict, because only as recently as a couple of days ago, there was a de-escalation process which was agreed on both sides. So what
right.
has actually happened on the ground on the very day? What has caused this? In spite of the disagreement of this sovereignty over this area called Gawan, but what actually
Right.
happened on that day? So I think that these facts have got to be thrashed out. And of course, there are different versions amongst the
Right.
military commanders, but at least let the get facts straight and agree on both sides. And I think that these two issues are not going to be resolved by a shouting match. This is very counterproductive because this is the first time I was when I watched I was on your show on your TV. And then the show was all about patriotism, so nationalism. But of course, there's patriotism and nationalism on the side of China as well. So I think that you're likely to win. You may win, try to win the argument on your side, but if the argument is not agree on the other side, it only leads to further conflicts. Um,
Right.
and I think it's demonizing China is not going to help. It may help. It may, of course, some people like to watch this. On if you are playing on nationalism or patriotism, a lot of patriotic Indians would love this. They loved you to bash China, demonize China, but it's not likely to solve the problem. Um,
Right. But
and also just demonizing China because China is not a democratic country. It's not going to win the argument on China's side, because on Beijing's side, even though it's not democratic, it has delivered major achievements over the past 30 years and becoming the second largest economy in the world.
But sir, but going by their past record, do you think there's any kind of truth to China's claim that the entire violence, the whole scuffle was started, from the Indian side? I mean, going by the past record, we know what has happened in
Well,
the past.
Well, I think that even in the past conflicts, for example, there was another standoff in Dok Lam, was it last year, and then this was eventually resolved. And of course, there were different versions of the story as to what happened in Dok Lam, but eventually through dialogue, this was resolved. And I don't see why these two issues, which I highlighted, the question of who owns this piece of land, this area. If there was a dispute, well, it needs to be talked and discussed, because this kind of question of sovereignty is not going to be resolved just by a shouting match. Secondly, what actually happened on that very day?
Right. So, no, but sir, do you think India,
Well, well, I think the two military commanders on both sides should carry on with the dialogue, even if they don't
okay,
agree. But also, I think that separately, these two issues must be isolated and separately dealt with. And of course, one bears on the other. But the most important thing is that who owns actually this? What is this area called Gawen? Is it a
but
disputed area, or is it the sovereignty is settled by both sides? It's not contested, or what? So I think that these the very major issue need to be addressed through dialogue.
sure, sir. But then see, India has lost 20 of its, jawans, officers, yesterday, and so do you think, India should take any kind of bold steps to, get the Chinese troops
Well,
off territory?
I
Because
no.
we've lost
Uh,
20 lives, in this whole standoff.
Well, I mean, India, the latest report is the loss of 20 lives, but there was also a report from the Chinese side, they lost twice as many lives as well, according to the Chinese reports, okay? There are no means of verifying that, but there was a report on the international media as well. So I think that there are loss of lives, unfortunately, on both sides. But I think the loss of lives is unfortunate because these two issues have not been adequately resolved. The question of the status of this piece of this area, and secondly, what actually happened on that day.
Right, right. So here, sir, what do you think at this point in time? What role do you think US can play in this
Well,
entire
I
clash
think,
between India and
yeah,
China?
I think that the Indian government, because there was an earlier suggestion or earlier offer from President Trump that he could intervene, but I think that Indian government, I think President Modi wisely rejected that because that's only complicates matters. Because of course, let's not forget that there is a 360 degrees rivalry between the United States and China, whereas India, of course, stands on the side of the United States as a kind of united front. But on the other hand, this would elevate this kind of incident to a global kind of conflict. And of course, China is not backing down even against the United States. So I think
Right,
it only complicates matters.
right, right. So, any other country do you think you expect involvement at this point in time apart from US?
Well, I don't think that the involvement of any other countries is going to help. After all, it's a bilateral border dispute. It's not got nothing to do with the United States. It's got nothing to do with Pakistan or Nepal
Right,
or any other countries or
right.
Vietnam or whatever. And involving the other countries is going to complicate the matter and elevate it to an even much larger conflict, which is not going to help to address
But
the issue.
sir, at this point in time, when the world is fighting a global pandemic with COVID, and when there are larger
I
issues
think,
at
yeah,
hand, do you
right.
think it was the right time, even if China wanted to have a dialogue with India, do you think this is the time to strike when the entire world is suffering and people are dying, on a day-to-day basis? So, I mean,
Um,
is it even fair, for
I think first of all, the pandemic is a global issue now, because it affects a lot of countries in the southern hemisphere. And I mean, Brazil is registering huge numbers of fatalities and death, and
exactly, yeah.
even in the United States and also in India itself. And even for China, there seems to be a comeback in Beijing. So I think that this is a worldwide issue. Rather than looking at this issue as another way to strike your perceived enemy, it's also an opportunity for cooperation. For example, helping each other with much needed medical supplies, sharing data and experiences. And then this would help to cool down the kind of relationship. I think that this is both a risk and an opportunity.
But then, have you seen in the last 3 months, or let's say last 6 months, since the pandemic has struck, the world, have you actually seen in any way China cooperating with, with other countries in disseminating information? Because if you see the numbers today, United States stands at like around close to 2 million, confirmed cases, and China is somewhere around 80,000, where that is where the whole outbreak started. So do you think they are cooperating with the world, in disseminating information appropriately?
Well, first of all, of course, when this whole virus first started, no one had a very good idea what the nature of the virus was, because it's completely new virus. It's very deadly, and no one has seen it before. So even though it was first discovered, the major outbreak was in Wuhan, and the local authorities in China did not have a very good idea what it was. So at the moment, obviously, they would look deeply into it, but they did inform the WHO as early as in the 3rd of January, then also informed the Center for Disease Control in the United States almost on the same day, on the 3rd of January. Now it's a long, long time between the 3rd of January and now. And of course, China seems to have adopted draconian steps,
Right.
which was being criticized by the world. But actually, as far as China is concerned, it had worked, but at great cost to China. So, from China's perspective, the virus also is a shocking reminder of how deadly it can be. And then, of course, there were some failings in the local officials how to deal with the virus in the first instance. But they did inform the world very early. And then by locking down the whole country, it saved a lot of time for the rest of the world. But as whether but the rest of the world didn't seem to take things very seriously at first until it's a
Right.
little bit too late.
But then, I mean, just last couple of questions, sir. Just to, ask that the media in China is controlled by the government. It's a state-controlled media, and the information that is being released to the world via the Chinese media. How far, do you think we can believe it? Is there how much truth is
Well,
there to the information that they provide, even
well,
with regards to the fact that their claims that more number of lives have lost in this current standoff? How does one believe what they're saying?
Well, I mean, there are lots of foreigners, not necessarily in Wuhan at the height of the crisis, but there are foreign businesses in many parts of the world. And of course, through the internet, there are lots of news, facts You just can't lock down the whole country. So I think that for the big country like China, with so many people, it's impossible to just keep on telling lies. This is really for such a big kind of pandemic. And so as people are going back to work, as businesses are going back to work, and obviously China would not take this risk if things are not under control. So I think that there is too much of a demonization of China. But it's not going to solve the problem. It's going to complicate matters for all concerned.
Okay, so just as a closing remark, coming back to the discussion that we started off, the entire standoff between India and China currently, what do you think needs to be done to resolve matters, and what is your message to both India and to
And
China?
I think the first of all is to make sure that any military conflicts will not happen. Because when I say military conflict, I do mean firing shots. Because once shots are fired, it would escalate. It would be what is known as a security spiral, as one side,
Right.
so would up the ante. So I
Right.
think that the very firm protocol must be mandated on both sides to make sure that this doesn't happen. Secondly, I think that there needs to be maybe a joint investigation or joint dialogue as to what actually happened on that day, regardless of the dispute of that status of that area. But last but not least, but most important, is to decide on this dispute over the status of this particular sport of area, Khao Gawan, whether it's within the line of control on either side. And this cannot be resolved by the military commanders. It's got to be elevated to the very high level between two
Right.
countries.
Right. All right, sir. Thank you so much for
All right,
sharing your
thank you.
views with
Can
us.
you
Was a
can you send me
pleasure.
a link to watch it, please?
Yes, yes, definitely. I will do that.
Thank
Once
you.
we edit it and
Thank
upload
you.
it, I'll send it across.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure, pleasure, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.